to day 2.
Yeah, we're back at it.
We are. We're just going to jump right in.
We're going to jump right in because we got so much to cover.
Where did we leave off?
Well, we were beginning to tackle those sort of core principles that Pope Leo gave us.
Yes.
In this incredible document.
Okay. So somebody's jumping. Should we do a very quick recap in case somebody just jumps into this episode and they're like, what did I miss?
Sure. Well, this is what I'd say is just listen to the episode we did before.
Okay.
No,
that's great.
No.
Right.
I mean, yeah, what we covered in the last episode was we looked at just Catholic social teaching, and we actually spent a lot of time what's an encyclical letter versus an apostolic exhortation, and what kind of weight do these pronouncements by the Pope have, and what's Catholic social doctrine, and why does it matter to us?
Yep.
How does it work? And we looked at all that, and then we dove into the first major chapter, which is he lays out the core principles of Catholic social teaching that he's going to utilize in his sort of analysis of, the hopes, the promises, but also the potential perils of artificial intelligence.
Cool. So
we started in on the two, what I call the two first principles of Catholic social teaching. The first principle is the nature and dignity of the human person who's created in the image of God. And our understanding of social matters depends entirely upon how we understand the nature and dignity of the human person. And so our social relationships, according to the Church, have to reflect and express and create the conditions for the flourishing of the human person in all of our dignity.
Yep.
And then we talked about the common good as the first principle of Catholic social teaching, because the common good is really the goal that we're aiming at. We're trying to create those conditions within which the individual and groups of people can flourish in the fullness of human life.
Yeah.
And so we have to, the Church wants to always discern and then critique and then propose, discern what's good, what's not so good for the human person, and then propose, a path forward, while at the same time showing us where the limitations and maybe some of the, the shortcomings of our way of seeing these things can be. So the common good, I call it the first principle, because a first principle is always a starting point, and then as you reason to a conclusion, you start with the principles, you apply the principles to a set of circumstances, and then you try to arrive at a kind of moral judgment about, what's good, what's evil.
Gotcha.
So that's where we left off.
Recap. Okay.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground. But I thought what we do today is let's just continue looking at the principles, and then we'll jump in to the next chapter, which really begins to address artificial intelligence itself and does a bit of a diagnostic.
Okay.
Like what are we dealing with here? What are some of the promises and positive things that AI can bring to us, but what are the things that we have to be really aware of that could really be harmful?
Fantastic.
All right?
Yes.
Does that sound like a plan?
That sounds like a great plan.
All right. So the next principle, the reason I cut us off in the last episode is because I went, oh boy, we can't end with this principle because it's a hard principle to understand,
okay,
but it's a really important one. And it's called the universal destination of material goods. Okay, that's the principle.
Why can't they just say something that dummies can understand?
Well, it's not a hard...
Okay,
It's not a hard concept to understand. I think in our day and age, especially as Americans, it's a hard concept or principle to receive and accept.
Okay.
Because of our economic sensibilities, we just as Americans just bristle when the Church talks about this. At least some Americans, I would say Americans that are more into, free markets, market economies, free enterprise,
So
capitalism.
did you say universal destination of material goods?
The universal destination of material goods.
Okay.
So basically, here's the principle. The principle is that God has destined all the things of creation for the entire human race. And so we can't ever create a social scenario where certain populations of people are systemically or systematically excluded from access to those things.
Okay.
So
can you give an example?
Air, water, clean earth, minerals. Like we can think, I can think of a million examples, like access to clean water.
Okay.
Access to, like right now, a big issue that we hear about all the time is rare earth minerals. Can a country create a monopoly where everybody, one country can hold everybody else hostage because they happen to have a surplus of rare earth minerals that everybody needs?
Yeah.
Or do we have to create a scenario where everybody has access to it? Now, what people oftentimes don't understand is that the church then goes on to say that the normal way in which the universal destination of material goods is realized is through private ownership.
Okay.
In the exchange of a marketplace. But what happens is, because of structures of power, because of certain monopolies that can form, what ends up happening is resources can be concentrated in the hands of a small number of people.
Sure.
And then everybody is at their mercy to be able to have access to those things.
Yeah.
So it becomes a very delicate situation when you're trying to figure out, well, what's the best way to organize all of this so that we optimize everybody's access? And the way we do that is through a well-regulated and also properly juridical framed marketplace.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Through the exchange of goods and the exchange of labor and so on.
That makes sense.
So, it's hard because the church would say, quoting Aristotle, that property should be private in ownership, but common in use. And everybody goes, oh, because Americans would say property should be owned absolutely.
Okay.
Like, I have an absolute right to what I own.
Yes.
But in practice, we usually realize that this is not actually true. Nobody actually really believes that. For example, when I drive a car, this car, if I own it, is mine.
Mm-hmm.
But we would all agree that I shouldn't be able to drive my car any way I want to, anywhere I want to.
Right.
So if I decide to go do donuts on your front yard, we would say you are violating my rights in the use of your property, right? Does that make sense?
That visual is hilarious to me. Yes.
Yeah, I would do that in my Hyundai Santa Fe.
Yeah. My gosh.
So the principle stands that we should own things privately. There's a difference, and we've talked about this when we talk about justice. There's a difference between what's mine and what's yours. But there's a social responsibility, or Pope John Paul II used the term, there's a social mortgage on the use of property, and therefore I bear a social responsibility for how I use or how I accumulate property. Like, I don't have an absolute right to just have as much as I can get my hands on without there being some obligation on my part to use what I have for the benefit of the society at large. Because if my neighbor is starving and doesn't put a roof over their head and I have 10 times more than I need to live, well, there's a social responsibility that I have to do something to contribute in some way so that my neighbor has at least their most basic needs met.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's but how we adjudicate and how we organize around that principle is going to require prudence and proper discernment.
Right.
So that's the universal destination. And he is going to make the case here, and he mentions it, but he'll get into it more, is that we have a new form of property today in the form of things like patents, Like, for example, when Monsanto has a patent on a seed,
mm-hmm.
and now they control all the seeds that grow all of our crops.
Yeah, yeah.
That raises all sorts of ethical and moral questions about what people's private proprietary rights ought to be over the food supply. But in the case of a patent, or you think about algorithms, when a company owns the algorithm, what does that do to people's data? What does that do to people's privacy? What does that do to, there's just all sorts of ethical questions like that come up. Or a platform, like this came up a lot. Like, okay, we have, say X, or Twitter, or Instagram, or one of those platforms, and you think about, okay, well, it's privately owned, and we want to have ethical conduct around the exchange of ideas, and we as a company decide that we're going to censor these people who happen not to agree with our political convictions.
Yeah.
And then we realize that that has the power to radically alter the course of an election cycle. Well, that raises huge problems about what it means. What kind of proprietary rights do you have over the algorithms that are shaping public reality in a way that far exceeds and is grossly disproportionate than the influence that a corporation should have?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not regulated it's hard to regulate at the state level or the government level.
Yeah.
And wherever it is regulated at the state level, it then, on the other side of the equation, becomes such a profound violation of the freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Like what you see in China, or you see in some of these other countries where they just totally control, those platforms. So it just raises all sorts of complicated questions about what does the universal destination of material goods mean in the digital age, and in the age of AI and social media and all of that. So we're not getting into it yet, but that's the principle. He says this has to be. We have to.
It's quite the setup there.
Yeah. So that's the third principle. Next principle, subsidiarity. Okay. Subsidiarity basically states that institutions need to support personal responsibility at the lowest level possible of social organization. So I always frame it this way. Subsidiarity states that those who are nearest to a problem should be the ones that solve it. Okay. And those at a further distance or at a higher level of social organization, like the federal government, for example, or the state government, their job is to create the conditions for other associations and other mediating institutions to directly address whatever their local community is dealing with. So this is a very, very foundational principle of the common good. So for the common good to be realized, we have to respect, we have to respect the universal destination material goods. So there has to be access to the resources that people need in order to live. And secondly, the social organization and sense of personal responsibility should devolve to the lowest possible level. So if the problem is a family problem, the family should solve it. And if the family can't solve it, then maybe you go to your church. Okay. And if your church can't solve that problem, maybe you go to your local community. And if your local community can't solve it, then maybe you go to the county level. And if the county can't solve it, maybe you go to the state level. You see what I mean? Yeah. That's subsidiarity. But when the federal government steps in and comes up with a one-size-fits-all for every case of domestic violence, what you've done is you've usurped personal responsibility, and you've created a uniform kind of policy bureaucratic different solution to a problem that really has to be solved on a very relational and human and personal level.
So it's like 1984. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, what's that other book? There's another book that kind of deals with similar problem.
Is it Brave New World?
Well, there's that one. My kids all read this book.
There's a lot of them.
I can't think of what it is.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's the same. Yeah, it's that idea. Okay, so that's subsidiarity, and what sometimes the church just kind of blows me away. Like like, wow, I can't believe you said that. Like, wow, how sensible is that? But a lot of people are clamoring for a state solution. Like the state needs to solve this problem. And the church, in her deepest instinct, says, no, the state has a role to play. But in the order of subsidiarity, Pope Leo says, no, this needs to be a shared responsibility. We need to come together as a community and decide what we together, on the level of human relationality, are going to do to mitigate the harmful effects of AI. And I just think that is a tall order. That's a hugely audacious order. Like, how is that going to happen?
Right.
But the fact that the church would put that out as the solution, to me, is like, the church really is the expert in humanity, because that is the right solution. But the easy reach is to say, let's either privatize it to a level of individualism that will never work, or let's collectivize it and let's just let the state take care of the problem. Well, that's going to be a disaster too. But the church says, no, the answer is in and through the principle of subsidiarity, where, like, for example, parents need to learn how to create a culture of right use for technology in the home.
Yeah.
And maybe the school system, local school system, needs to figure out how to support parents in that. That's the solution. And I think that's right on. Like, that's just right on.
Yeah.
So.
That's really interesting. I because I do, as you're saying that, there's such a, it seems like we're in such a polarized world right now. You said a lot of people would be clamoring for a state solution, but I think of where I grew up, it's pretty rugged individualism, and, they're almost at all cost, they do not want the government to be, like, involved in that kind of stuff, But it's almost so individualized that it becomes, it's hard to find consensus, because people are coming, even in that, let's use the school district as a for instance. You have half of the population that probably has a shared value of family first, like, let's do things that within the family that help to promote these kind of virtues and values. But then you have another swath of the population that is very broken, and they don't really abide by those same kind of values and stuff. It would be hard in that kind of a community to sort of have a consensus,
Yeah. Well, you're
Some
right.
people are giving their kids phones when they're 6 years old, like with free access to anything, and then there's some families that are like, you don't get it until you're in high school. Like, how do you find the find the middle ground?
Where's the mean in that? No, it's messy and it's difficult, but trying to resolve or trying to work towards a better solution at a more local level is going to turn out better in the end if the community makes the concerted effort. For example, when parents step up and say, what kind of educational environment do we need to create? How are we going to educate our kids on the humane and dignified use of technology, for example, and having an honest and hardcore conversation about that? And then what are the governing principles which ought to inform the conversation and the final decisions that are made about this? That's where, as Catholics, we need to study a document like this so that we bring to bear in that conversation at the local level real insight and real wisdom that actually could help illuminate the problem and propose a really honest and good solution that would really solve the problem. Whereas when we say we just need the state to tell us what to do, most likely when you resort to centers of power to do that, they're oftentimes going to have ulterior motives and other profit-driven agendas that are not going to be in the best interest of the people. And the church calls that out. So people that are closest to a situation, like parents care more about their kids than anybody else does. Let's just be honest. By and large. I mean, obviously there's exceptions to that, but by and large, even if you're an imperfect parent that's struggling to, make ends meet and keep it together, you still love your kids more than even the local school board or the local superintendent of schools, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, so that's subsidiarity. But the other principle that balances subsidiarity out, again, it's all part of the common good, is the principle of solidarity. And solidarity is a particular kind of fraternity or social friendship where we recognize that we all belong to each other. It's like the parable of the Good Samaritan. Like, I recognize that my neighbor is someone for whom I have a personal responsibility to take care of them, to love them, to respect and honor their rights as a person. I can't just forget them. I can't just ignore them. I think about like one story from my own life. I had a neighbor when we lived in Latrobe whose husband died suddenly of a heart attack. And I mean, I think they were like 32, 33 years old, and they had 2 young kids, both of whom were autistic.
Yeah.
And it was just a hard situation. And she had a family support structure, which was good. But she just wasn't the kind of person that was capable of taking care of her yard and mowing her grass.
Yeah.
So I just did, you know what I mean? That summer, and I let her kids come over, and so she could have a break, and we just watch their kids. And I mean, you do this kind of stuff all the time for your neighbors. You know what I'm talking about. But like, that's a sense of solidarity that we have a sense of personal responsibility for our neighbor as a brother or sister, as a child of God. And so on the one hand, solidarity pushes against a kind of paternalistic, kind of welfaristic type of mindset where we just hand over all of I don't care. It's like Ebenezer Scrooge when he says, why do I need to help those poor children? I mean, there's institutions for that.
Yeah.
It's that mentality where we can kind of be apathetic and ignore the suffering of my neighbor, especially those in my nearest proximity.
Yeah.
Because, they're social services. And that's not to say that I'm to step in and solve everybody's problems.
Right.
But solidarity recognizes that we have a real human connection to each other, and we have to have a kind of fraternal care and a sense of social charity and love for each other. I think driven by compassion and mercy.
Yeah, and I think the real challenge of that would probably come in to a scenario where maybe your neighbor is not an easy person to love, or where you might perceive that all of their problems are self-imposed. You're like, well, duh, no wonder you're in that predicament. You're making stupid decision after stupid, but to still love them, to still like see them as somebody who, going back to the whole, on some level, there's still a basic dignity that I need to respect, like, and even if I disagree with how you've lived your life or put yourself in that predicament, it would still be a good thing for me if your husband dies to mow your lawn for you, like. Yeah, because it's easy, it's easy to love those who love you back, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Jesus says, it's easy to love the people that are good to you in return, but love the people who can't repay you, So yeah, that's the principle of solidarity.
Yeah.
And it's not meant to be, the church is very clear about this. It's not this kind of condescending attitude. You look down and go, oh, this poor person, like you really see Christ in the other, and you really see the other as an equal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but for the grace of God, that would be me. So there's a real sense of, like, a genuine sense of love and concern for the other, even if they're living, the less than ideal life. It doesn't matter in the eyes of Christ.
Yeah.
So it, obviously very briefly applied to the digital space, it's like, again, he says, like, there's no top-down solution to the way people treat each other on, say, social media. There's no top-down solution per se that's gonna figure out how to solve the problem of the kid who wants to turn to an AI, counselor or friend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
that's always going to be a possibility, and we're not going to solve that problem by trying to regulate that from the top down, because most likely the process of trying to over-regulate that situation is going to create a level of control and power over our lives that's going to create another set of problems.
Yeah.
So again, it's like, how do we take a sense of responsibility for the poor, kid who's lonely, who doesn't feel like they have friends? like what are we as a community going to do to help pull those people in and have a sense of human connection so that they don't feel the need to go to an AI. You know, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
The church is looking at this at a much deeper level of our humanity.
Yeah.
And that there isn't a government solution to the problem of the human heart. You know, we have to address it on a different level. So, the final thing about subsidiarity and solidarity is that if you have subsidiarity without solidarity, you end up with radical individualism. Everybody looking out for their own interest. And if you have solidarity without subsidiarity, you end up with collectivism or totalitarianism, where the government tries to control every dot and tittle of our lives in the name of protecting people and making everybody feel safe and da-da-da-da. And the church says both of those solutions are dehumanizing. And so the truth is in the mean.
Yeah.
The common good is realized when you know, there's universal access to the goods we all need. And we make that access possible through the principle of subsidiarity and solidarity. Now, I can just say, if you just pause and just reflect on that triadic harmony of principles. So there's universal access to the goods we all need through the principles of subsidiarity and solidarity. That is a vision of society that doesn't look like anything we experience on Earth through a capitalist-driven system or a communist-driven system.
Right.
It's just a different way of seeing social organization. And that's the kind of organization that the church aspires to within her own life as a church. And he admits at the end, we fail at it a lot.
Yeah.
But it's a vision that God has for our social life in terms of the nature and dignity of the human person.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like. So it's when you take those principles together and you apply them to any social problem, you'll find the solution.
Yeah, well, yes.
Not an easy solution. But
right. It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a bit utopian, like, because it requires people to have the this disposition of the heart that buys into notions of self. It seems like the built in between the lines of those things, there's probably self-sacrifice that would have to be embraced. So if you're a corporation, if you're the head of a corporation, like, just to use your example of rare earth minerals, on one hand, that you could stand to make a ridiculous amount of money by sort of, holding all of those things hostage and dispensing them almost like a little faucet, like here's your little bit, withholding it from certain groups. It would require people to be able to be like, I don't have to have total control. I don't have to aspire to making obscene amounts of money through the control of this substance or whatever it is, this like good material good. That just seems like I don't know. I want so badly to be like, yeah, this could happen. But there's such a skeptical, cynical part of me that's like, how in the world would this ever happen? And to me, everything you're saying earlier, I had a thought of like, this all comes down to conversion of the human heart. Like, and this is probably where the lived Catholic's experience sometimes proves itself to be pretty crappy, because we don't, as at least my experience for the most part in Catholic world is, there's not a lot of effort or intention about not forced conversion, but at least like helping other people to see the Catholic life as this, fulfilling kind of thing. Like, and it does mean suffering. It does mean sacrifice. Like, those are part and parcel to it. But it's also very it's ultimately very fulfilling and beautiful. But it's like, I feel like a lot of Catholics, obviously I live in the United States, so I'm speaking about Catholics in the United States, have sort of bought into the whole, like, my faith is private, and just kind of keep it to myself and go about my way silently. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's it's easy for us to compartmentalize it and keep our faith over here, and for it not to integrate with our whole life. But that, I think, everything you're saying is a question of formation. And Pope Leo, he actually makes a point of saying this at multiple points along the way, that the church bears a particular responsibility for this vision of the world. Like, we have to bring this to the world as our effort to build the kingdom of God on earth. And we first have to be formed in this way of life.
Yeah.
And that formation needs to take place in the home, first and foremost, but the home has to be supported by the parish. So the parish has to be a place where the family receives that kind of formation, so that we become those kind of people, citizens, that participate in our society and bring that vision of humanity to the world. And,
wow,
without
that would be a game changer.
Yeah, but without being too, overly critical. I mean,
well, I don't think you're being critical.
We do a lot of that, actually. There's a lot of good examples of, like, think about some of the Supreme Court justices, or think about some of the officials in our governments, or some of the medical, professionals or business people out there that are strong Christian people, and or specifically Catholics, that make a very, very positive contribution because they take their faith seriously.
Sure.
Now, it's just always a question of multiplication. It's like the more of us out there that are living like that, the better we are. And
I guess that's what I'm. Yeah, you're right. There are. I'm not dismissing. In fact, my brother is a doctor, and he's working on a plan right now to do more of an independent, like, gathering other Catholic doctors together to almost have this, like, independent Catholic health network type thing. And it's pretty,
because he practices medicine differently.
Well, right.
Than the kind of institutionalized model that suffers from all the problems that we just described.
Yeah.
There's a lack of subsidiarity in the healthcare system.
Yeah.
And there's a lack of solidarity
right.
in it. And it becomes institutionalized, top down, and people lose any sense of personal agency or dignity in the process. And your brother sees that. He might not be able to, give a tutorial on it.
Yeah.
But he sees it and he experiences it. And, hats off to Brian. And so he's going to make a decision based on his faith to go do medicine differently. That's exactly what we're all called to do, and whatever. So,
but that requires risk, a
Sure.
lot of risk, a lot of yes, and that. So I mean, that's what I mean. Like
But it also, I think, more fundamentally, it requires the right formation, because if you're right. in how do I say this? If you are initiated into this vision of the world, it's inspiring, and it's exciting.
Yeah.
The problem is too many of us never have the opportunity to actually understand, and that's why I say, like, every Catholic should spend time, like, really reading and reflecting on and praying with this document. And all that's, I mean, the beautiful thing about an anniversary document is we get to revisit these themes every so often in the church. And you don't have to go back and read Rerum Novarum. You don't have to go back and read all the old ones. Just read this one, because this one's going to pull forward all the relevant things that those ones said, and give us the opportunity to reflect on, how do those principles apply here and now for my life today? Because these are the things that we're dealing with right now.
Yep.
So it's
sorry, man, I got a sidetrack there.
No,
it's
not a sidetrack. It's not a sidetraction. Is that a word?
It sounds really cool. Yeah. Sidetraction.
A sidetraction. Anyway,
go.
There's two more principles. Okay.
2 more principles.
Yeah, social justice. Oh boy, that one's fraught with all sorts of baggage. So when people hear the word social justice, they usually think of Marxism, and radical revolutionary activists who take to our streets and burn things down. And unfortunately, that's too bad, because that term's been co-opted. Like, the first time that term entered into the mainstream vocabulary of the world was through the Catholic Church's document Quadragesimo Anno on the 40th anniversary of Rerum Novarum. And it has a very different meaning than most people associate with it. So we shall reclaim the meaning of that term.
Go for it.
All right. So social justice, basically, when Jesus, you remember when Jesus taught that at the end of time, all the nations of the world would be brought before God, and they would be judged, and the goats and the sheep would be separated.
Yes.
And the criteria for that would be basically, how do you treat the least among you? And whatever you do to the least of you, you do to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the principle of social justice, that every society always should organize itself in such a manner that we give a preferential care to those who are the most vulnerable. Okay? What most societies tend to do is they give a preferential option to the most capable and the most powerful. And everybody else gets left behind and thrown in the trash bin. And nobody cares. Because the people with the power and the influence get to do what they want, while the rest of us are at the mercy of those people. Now,
do you think they do that with the intention or with the mindset that if they continue to open doors for people who are quote unquote more capable or more ambitious, that the success of those people will trickle down and have a positive effect on the lower? I mean, I'm just curious.
Yes, it can. It people that, for example, people with a lot of money who invest, in a business and create jobs. I mean, that's a good thing. The church isn't talking about that kind of thing. It's something as simple as, has it ever occurred to you that a person in a wheelchair can't get into a church? So maybe we should build ramps for them. So, yes, we should put money towards this, that, and the other thing, but we have people that can't even get into the building without being assisted by someone else.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of mindset. So it's like there are certain people, like, for example, I think of my little sister who has Down syndrome. I think a positive fruit of this proper understanding of social justice is that at one point in time, our society decided that people with developmental disabilities had something to contribute to society. And so businesses started creating opportunities for them to have jobs. And those jobs are the kind of jobs that they can do. And my sister has worked now for 30 years for the mayor's office. A kid I grew up with who has Down syndrome has worked for Microsoft his entire adult life, and he's a millionaire, and he has Down syndrome. No joke.
That's awesome.
He's got unbelievable stock options.
And
all he did his whole life was set up AV equipment for all the meetings that they have on their main campus, and he still works there.
Dang.
I mean, like, so that's a proper sense of social justice. It's not a Marxist solution where we're gonna collectivize private ownership, do away with private property, and have the government allocate resources and tell everybody what they get to do with their lives. That's the Marxist understanding of social justice. That is not the Catholic Church's view of social justice.
Okay.
The Catholic view is we have to set up society in such a way that there are readily accessible ways of making sure that nobody slips through the cracks.
Gotcha.
Everybody is cared for and has their basic needs met. I think my parents started this place called Community Homes for relatively higher functioning people with developmental disabilities. We live in a society that gave them the ability to start a private organization called Community Homes, which was actually a collaborative effort between state and private sector. So the state of Washington and the private sector, they came together and they were able to create a financial model that utilized the resources from both places. And now they have 13 homes for people with developmental disabilities to live in, which solved a huge problem, which is what happens when the parents of these people get too old to care for them or die. They have to have a place to go without being stuck in a government institution that doesn't provide the kind of care that they deserve. So a social justice-minded person is a person who's going to say, here's a vulnerable population that needs support. How can we come together as a community of people and put together some kind of support and care structure that's going to give these people the dignified life that they deserve?
Yeah.
That's the way the church thinks about it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's the principle of social justice. Relative to AI, I think that, there's issues that he brings up, like how do we overcome the problem of tribalism and the kind of fragmenting stuff that we see going on in the digital space, or how do we protect the young and the vulnerable who are very impressionable and get stuck in, certain digital spaces that become very formative of them, but are actually harming their humanity. So again, thinking about who are the most vulnerable ones in our midst, and how are we organizing ourselves in this new digital space in a way that is mindful and attentive to the most vulnerable among us. That's the question.
Okay. Yep.
So again, you have to look at the other principles: solidarity, subsidiarity, universal destination, material goods, to think, what does a just solution to this look like when these principles come together?
Wow.
Yeah. And again, for that issue, like the one I just named, it's probably a conversation between parents and the local school board.
Mm-hmm.
How are we forming and educating our children around a proper understanding of their humanity, so that they don't retreat into digital space as a way of isolating from their peers and becoming incapable of building proper social human relationships? That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's a question that parents and experts in the field of education could come together and come up with decent solutions around. Like, for example, schools that say, we're not going to have cell phones at school anymore. Right. And what do they find when in schools that do this? The kids start talking to each other and start playing with each other. It's like, oh, what a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
but it took a concerted community effort of people coming together and saying, here's a policy that we're going to apply at the local level for our school system, because we believe that this is going to be in the best interest of our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than the state of whatever mandating a law from above that may or may not be applied evenly and properly.
Yeah. And I imagine that, sometimes these motivations, they have to be, for it, I think, to be fruitful the way this document is talking about. The motivations can't be based on fear, we're afraid that our kids are going to become, or our kids are going to be overcome by self-thinking robots. So we need to, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like a fear-motivated solution is never the right kind of solution. It's like whenever a person takes their kid out of public school to homeschool because they're afraid that the exposure to the culture is going to be detrimental to their children. And then the result is sometimes they create kids who don't know how to interact with, well with other kids. So it's like the motivation, I think, and this probably comes back to that principle of formation. Like, it has to be coming from a place where it's more motivated by these concepts, common good, all the things you mentioned, subsidiarity, rather than we're afraid, so let's come together and make some decisions.
Yeah, Pope Leo makes a statement that I think is one of my new favorites that addresses this, and he says we have to learn how to integrate technology into this is not exact words, but into a human experience of relationality. So it's not a question of, he kind of concludes one section of the document by saying the pathway is not one between being afraid of technology or being zealously enthusiastic for it, but of figuring out how we develop as a human race either in the direction of the city of God or the city of man. So do we cultivate the human reality of relationship, of personhood, or do we objectify and instrumentalize the person for the sake of profit and power and so on and so forth?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the paths. And that's a way harder choice. It's easier to either say, I just love technology, it's all awesome, or I hate it and I want to become a Luddite. Like those are easy responses,
right.
But they're not honest and truly human responses to the reality. Technology always remains neutral in the sense that it's a tool, and that tool needs to be used either for the human good, or it's going to be used against us. Like that's the real choice. But he also makes the point here that's really important, and it's a kind of development of the church's understanding of technology, I believe, that we also have to think about the very structure of technology itself already communicates a set of values. So, for example, when you create AI friends as an option for people to find connection, you already have a particular understanding of the human person and what's good for the human person in mind to create that technology. If you create a pornographic, world that people can live in, or God forbid in the near future you can go to, a place where you can have sex with a robot that's so lifelike and so humanoid in form that you almost don't know the difference, you already have a particular conception of human sexuality in mind that's already laced with your values of what the meaning of sex or the meaning of the human person and human connectivity is. And by default, replacing that human reality with a technology means that you don't understand what a human is. And we need to change our understanding of human nature based upon what can never be captured or communicated via technology. Like you just can't simulate the human soul or the interior life of a human heart, or the value and importance of growth and maturation, or the sense of belonging. Like you're never going to be able to go and have a true friendship with an AI, friend.
Right.
Because the response of that AI avatar is always going to be simulated and programmed by a human being who has a particular idea of what it means to be human, and they get to impose their value system on you. And they're going to impose a value system on you that's going to exploit your weakness and make them rich at the expense of your weaknesses, rather than the real cost of giving yourself in love to another person, which you can't profit from. Like you can't make money doing that.
Right.
It's impossible. The very nature of love, you can't monetize it, or it's not really love. As soon as you monetize it, it's not love anymore. So the market can never touch the most authentic depth of human experience. It's untouchable.
Yeah.
You can only experience it by experiencing it, and you can't simulate it. So we keep trying to solve real human problems by technological solutions, which are never going to work.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why he's writing about all this,
Wow.
Trying to put that in perspective. There are things that technologies can solve for us. Like when you want to figure out how to do something and you go into AI and you go, please show me how to, that's great.
Yeah.
You love that.
I
All
do
right.
love that.
We have one more principle.
Yep.
And that is the integral human development. And the idea of this principle is just that whatever we do socially has to conduce to the proper development of the human person, both the individual person, so our proper human growth and development and maturation, the full realization of our potential as human beings, and the development of the group, that is the community itself. Okay. And then the development of the person and the group has to attend to every aspect of being human.
Yeah.
So not just part of us, like not just our bodies, not just our souls, but our body and our souls, not just our minds, but also our wills, and not just our wills, but also our emotions. Like whatever social arrangement we create cannot do violence or violate the dignity of any part of ourselves. So we can't lie because we have a right to the truth. We can't, shame people because we have the right to interior freedom of the children of God. We can't suppress people's freedom because we have the right to a certain degree of autonomy and self-determination. And so our social relationships, for a social order to be just, okay, it also has to be an arrangement that maximizes the opportunity for integral human development of the individual, the development of the group, and the development of every part of the human person. So again, technology is not an intrinsic evil, but however we use it has to actually make us more human.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't dehumanize us. And so we can probably name many ways in which we already have, we just did, but ways in which AI and other digital technologies dehumanize us.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you if you can think of like an example of something that has been introduced to society that has been like a major, where we're like, okay, whoa, this is like a big mistake kind of thing. Has there been any examples of something that we've created where it's like it's been so glaringly obvious that it was something that shouldn't have been created, shouldn't have been?
Well, I mean, yes.
Because it seems like everything that's been created sort of, somebody could be like, well, justify its existence.
Well, I think, and this is a term that he brings up also in the document. He talks about like the weaponization of AI.
Okay.
So you're never going to prevent human beings from discovering the fundamental structures of creation and nature, like gravity, or combustion, or nuclear, fusion or fission, right? Because we are intelligent creatures, rational beings, capable of understanding the nature of things as they exist in themselves and in relation to other things.
Yeah.
That's just what it means to be human. We're always going to have that ability, and there's no way we can shut it off. Like, you're not going to say, okay, from now on, there's no more science. We don't get to discover anything because it's just too dangerous. Like, that's never going to happen because it's not, just like you're never going to tell humans to stop singing or to stop writing songs or poetry. It's like, it's never going to happen. Stop building things, It's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's not the problem. The problem is that when in our fallen, sinful human nature, we decide to utilize our knowledge through an application of knowledge on matter, which becomes what we call technology. And we develop a technology not in order to solve or heal the human condition, but in order to make war against it. So that's always the problem. So it's like, you can say, you can take a gun. You can say, well, is a gun a bad thing? It's like, well, I mean, it's better than a bow and arrow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. Maybe the bow and arrow is a bad thing.
Right.
It's a projectile.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's better than a spear.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I mean, like,
it's better than a rock.
It's better than a rock or a club or a dagger. I mean, so it's like, but when we take those technological advancements and say, I don't like my neighbor and I'm going to kill them now and take over them and then use my technology to annihilate their civilization so that they don't exist anymore, or I have to use this technology to defend myself against my evil neighbor that is bent on our destruction. Now we have the problem of the weaponization of technology and the war.
Yeah.
And of course the other thing that we use technology for is profit. So we can turn a profit very easily through technology because we can obtain a monopoly on a new invention, a new technique that can make us really rich. And that's fine. Like, I think of the kid who invented the little plastic thing that closes up a bag that you put a loaf of bread in. That kid
There was a kid that?
Yeah, it was a kid
Wow.
who created a cardboard thing, gave it to his dad because his dad was always frustrated with having to use ties.
Yeah.
You know, and this dad took that and they became a millionaire creating those little plastic clips.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I mean, nobody's going to complain about that.
Right.
That was a genuine improvement.
I don't think I've ever read a story of someone being killed by a bag clip.
Yeah. but you know, you can think of other things that can be used. So with AI and robotics, you can think about modern warfare and what that could do, and even drones. Like, just think of what we've been learning about drones. I mean, it's changed warfare, and it's made it way more perilous on the one hand, but it's also it's put constraints on warfare in another way. It's created like the whole Iran situation is fascinating because we're dropping multi-million-dollar missiles that have no counter offensive to a swarm of drone, like a drone swarm.
Yeah.
They can go and you're looking at a fraction of the cost. But the whole equation, the whole framework is wrong because we're using technology to wage war against each other, and that's, so there's a relative good in terms of I can defend myself, but there's an absolute evil in terms of it's never right to make war on people. So
it's so funny
any
how
technology can be thought
it's
of
just
in those
amazing.
terms.
It's amazing how we've always figured out a way to take probably some of the most innocuous inventions and figured out how to kill other people with them.
Well, I mean, another great example of that today is nuclear. I mean, the discovery of the atom and splitting the atom and all of that. That was an incredible feat of human science to not only be able to understand it, but then to be able to actually create that experiment.
Yeah.
And then, but you think
and harness it.
And you think, well, we have unlimited energy. If we just use nuclear power, like, it would solve all of our electricity issues, and it's clean. Mm-hmm. It's clean as long as we don't, we don't.
As long as it doesn't explode or whatever.
But I grew up with the fear of nuclear bombs. Growing up in Seattle, it was a constant childhood fear that, I heard on the news all the time about all the Soviet nuclear subs that were hanging off of the coast of Washington State and coming into Puget Sound, and all the little war games that were going on around Bangor and the sub base in Puget Sound. And I just think to myself, like, that's scary. So that's that path that we can put technology towards the integral human development, or we can put it towards this, a kind
destruction.
The city of destruction and evil and sin.
Yeah. Wow.
So, this section of the document ends with a little bit of an examine, and the Pope saying that it's fine for us as a church to be telling the world that these principles need to be applied in how we organize ourselves socially. But do we as a church do it? And I think his answer is a very gentle and humble, not as much as we should.
Yeah.
Like, we fail a lot at using these very principles with how we organize and run ourselves as a church. So this is every bit as much of a call to our own conversion, which I think, there's a purification of memory. How have we not been attentive to how have we used power to exploit weakness? How have we failed in solidarity? How have we failed to achieve the common good of the church because of our own sin? I think that's a great way to end this section, is to a sort of call to conversion. And I think this is a good place for us to wrap up this episode. When we come back in the next episode, what we'll dive into is how does he apply these principles directly to the challenges and the promises posed by artificial intelligence. And he has some really, really amazing reflections on the human experience that I really can't wait to get into, because This is the stuff that just gets me giddy. Like the insight and the counterintuitive wisdom of what Christ has revealed to us about human experience and how we become fully human is just the most amazing and brilliant insight that the world has at its fingertips. And yet, we just routinely fail to believe it and listen to it and embrace it. And so I look forward to coming back in the next episode.
I feel like you're like a dad reading, like a chapter book to his kid, and there's like the cliffhanger ending. It's like, oh, keep going, Dad. I gotta wait till tomorrow to hear the next.
Speaking of stories, it was all over social media yesterday that he quotes Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings.
Are you serious?
He does, yeah.
In the document? And
it's really all about this problem of how technology, how we instrumentalize and we objectify the human person, which that's Tolkien's whole story world is, the elves represent the proper understanding of humanity's relationship with the created order, this kind of harmonious, synergistic, organic type of relationship, versus the world of Sauron and the orcs, which is the instrumentalization of man's scientific knowledge for the sake of weaponizing and creating centers of power that exploit and destroy life.
Yeah.
And Mordor is sort of the quintessential image of what we create when we don't. It's a metaphor for what we create culturally and spiritually in our society when we allow the technocratic mindset to prevail. And that was Tolkien's main point. And Gandalf is the wizard, right? He has the arts down.
Yeah.
Compared to both Saruman and Sauron, who are magicians in the technocratic sense. Gandalf is the wise man who actually understands the proper place of technique in the service of what is fully human. And it's beautiful. So Tolkien has now officially become a contributor to the magisterium of the church.
That's great.
And Gandalf, no less. So I thought that was cool. It was all over.
I bet you love
media.
that.
I bet,
I'm sure.
I was like geeking out on that. I was like, yay. All right. Well, we'll be back for episode 3 next time, and come back because it's going to get even better.
See you then.
The Wise Guys Podcast is a production of Preambula Group, a Catholic ministry dedicated to helping you thrive in the heart of Jesus. Visit us on the web at preambula.org and follow us on social media.